If I were still with the unit.
Clear sight lines, tough to access.
From its reveal, Arcane Austin's Redfall has had me a bit confused. Although I love the idea of traversing a vampiric-ridden world with the freedom this developer typically provides, I couldn't help but question if this is a game we really needed right now. After receiving a delay, it's clear this game underwent some changes as it tries to balance its multiplayer elements and loot collecting systems, but the experience largely lacks direction. Before we get into the review, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters for making this possible. Please take a second to check out patreon.com/noisypixel to support independent game journalism. Redfall has you choose one of 4 characters: Devinder, Lael, Remy, and Jacob. They are each trapped in a town called Redfall after a series of events lead to a vampire invasion. The way the town is trapped from the outside world is actually pretty cool, with waves of surrounding water creating inescapable walls. Anyway, for reasons not expanded on past the opening chapter, the character you choose has access to special abilities. This was a pretty significant barrier to overcome since on a single-player campaign, each character is more or less a one-man army. Further, every character has the same opening mission, and the story attempts to place them all there, but it's so flimsy. Your first mission is to save civilians from a firehouse, which becomes your new base. However, it's currently overrun by cultists, so you can clear it out and everyone inside returns to business as usual. I never cared or interacted with these characters after this opening scene. Interacting with them provides no real insight into who they are or why I'm even helping them. The opening cutscene after saving them has them leave the safe room, and then we get a montage of all of them setting up the firehouse to become a base, but this would have been a lot better having this scene be a mission where we could set it up together. I mean, even after the base was just overrun, it seems these people are already vampire hunting experts. I was in a state of disbelief because the relationships between the main characters and these civilians were never expanded on. Another issue from this initial opening was how these civilians let the firehouse get taken in the first place, and how we're also sure it wouldn't happen again. The back gate is even unlocked, and there are little to no defenses surrounding the place. I mean, it doesn't seem like the enemy lacks firepower, so why not just plan another attack? I can usually look past all these things because it's a video game, but man, they left a lot of inconsistencies on the table. To add fuel to the fire, that no civilian carries any importance to this title after you defeat the boss, you'll progress to a new area. The game warns you that you can't return once you go, but why? There are still side missions and even a few story missions that can be taken on, but you'll lose access to them after progressing. This also hurts the general multiplayer element where I brought my friend to the game where we completed the final mission of an area and then moved on, which caused them to skip multiple story missions of their campaign. This is typically mitigated by only being allowed to play a player's campaign that has progressed the least. Still, this only further emphasizes that the core story is left as an afterthought. That said, the notes and books you're able to read scattered throughout the world provide the most significant world building and insight into the citizens of Redfall. In addition, there are some pretty good drops of lore and an explanation of events that require you to do a little bit of reading. I'll be honest and say that I never once cared about the main characters or the NPCs because there's a significant disconnect between every facet of this story. During the campaign, the main characters will never interact with each other, and strategy during multiplayer is mainly found only during boss battles, as one player can act as a decoy while the others deal damage. But the overall design has little to no diversity. Outside of their specials, each character plays the same and shares similar skill sets. What sucks is that some characters are considered to be a healer class, but it's tough to consider playing as them through single player because you don't need many of their special abilities that heal. So gameplay continues this trend of strange systems. I played on normal difficulty for review purposes, but there are multiple options and even an unlockable higher difficulty. The game flow has you choose a mission and then go set out in that direction. Nothing is blocked off from the player and you can go anywhere. That said, there's very little reason to. I spent most of my missions just running from one place to another without encountering any enemies. When I got to the objectives, enemies were found, but the AI is exceptionally limited. In fact, I would just run through an area, alerting enemies in the process, head to the mission objective marker, and then turn on invisibility using Jacob's power, and all the enemies would just go on their way, forgetting about me altogether. Once you complete the mission, you can fast travel back to the base, even when enemies are around, and progress the game. Now, I believe the idea here is to have players approach missions and enemy strongholds in multiple ways that I discover after completing the mission. However, I did take advantage of this, and I'm sure others will too. Experiences gained after completing missions, making discoveries, or fighting. Aside from stat increases, I never cared about the skill points earned because the skill tree itself is so insanely boring that it's possible to get through most of the game without paying attention to it. There are options to buff your character's special ability or hold on to more ammo, but then there are multiplayer exclusive skills that don't matter if you're trying to just play through it on a single player campaign. Trust me, the entire time I'm playing Redfall, I'm begging to have fun, but the experience is just so messy and dull. This also creeps up during moments when you have to fight, which is when the game becomes a bit more frustrating. You see, you lose HP super fast, and enemies have a pretty accurate shot. Although they can be taken down rather easily, enemies that are grouped up adds to the challenge, and I died a lot. There's just no way around it. Luckily, there's no consequence outside of some lost funds, and you'll spawn to the closest safe house or landmark, which you'll have to discover before heading into missions. So even if you did die, all the enemies you took down before and damage dealt are still present, giving you a chance to just inch your way through every mission. Unfortunately, it makes the entire experience a pain given that some vampire abilities can just one-shot you. That said, vampires will be the most formidable foes in the game. While most can be taken down quickly alone, groups of vampires are tough to handle. Throughout the campaign, vampire nests will appear across the map. As they expand, players will encounter stronger enemy types unless you close the door, which is randomly placed on the map and needs to be found within its radius, an ongoing trend that we'll get into later. Here, you'll run through a linear alternate reality, fight vampires, probably die a few times, and then defeat the core. You're then given time to collect epic loot and you'll close the door. After a few of these, you should have some of the strongest equipment in the game, so it's good to do at least some of them. But on the other hand, if you're quick at completing missions, you can just not do them at all, defeat the boss, and then move on to the next area. Oh, and before I move on, the vampires need to be staked after their health is depleted, which sounds fantastic on paper, but if you don't do it fast enough, they revive, which is extremely annoying when there's a large group of them. Key items and mission objectives are never straightforward. The issue begins with the map that presents a simple, small town map design. However, you don't have maps of general areas such as dungeons or small parts of the map. You can barely even zoom in, which makes navigation difficult because you can't tell if something is underground or on a mountain. Even if you have an objective, it shows as a giant diamond on the map. You can then set a marker, but you only have one marker to actually place. So if you want to mark a place to revisit, you can't because your marker is taking you to a mission. Further, multiplayer markers are the same color as yours, which is a significant oversight. When it comes to objective-based items like keys, these take way too long to find that sometimes I wanted to give up entirely as I searched through every section of a building multiple times, looking for a key and couldn't find it. It's almost like padding on the actual mission. However, some items do get a marker, so it's highly inconsistent in that regard. Watching someone play this game will look like they're lost 75% of the time, and more often than not, they probably are. Visually, I like some of the environmental designs of Redfall. All the environments share a unique sense of charm, giving the feeling that you are progressing. While some assets are reused every now and then, I felt different areas were distinct enough to encourage exploration. However, as I mentioned, you'll be running through with little to nothing to do for most of them. Animations are minimal, and the movesets of enemies and interactions with NPCs are dumbed down to the point that it hurts to even witness. I encountered several bugs that I half expected while playing, but it is still sad to see. Sometimes enemies would just become unresponsive, or I'll be standing in front of them and they wouldn't react. The assets of the guns in your menu loadout are entirely inconsistent, showing that you have a stake placed on a weapon when you don't, but you do. It's weird. And one time my gun kept firing, and no, it wasn't my controller. Other strange occurrences happened, but I hope they get patched. Redfall is an anomaly because a game with this good of a team behind it can't possibly be this bad, and yet it is. There are these drips of looter-shooter, RPG, and multiplayer elements sprinkled throughout, but none of them work together, delivering a messy and almost incomprehensible experience. Still, gunplay and exploration stay consistently fun thanks to the satisfaction of taking down enemies and level design, and as a result of all of this, the single-player campaign is extremely dull, while the multiplayer campaign can provide bouts of fun, but you'll mainly be laughing at the strange AI behavior or the fact that no one can find a key to a door. Noisy Pixel is giving Redfall a 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.